Hi, I'm Rami Jubran, Chief of Staff here at Drinks, and this is the Drinks Podcast, the business of online alcohol. The alcohol business is at an inflection point. The way people discover brands, how they research what to buy, where they actually make purchases, it's all shifting. A lot of traditional approaches just aren't working the way they used to. Every episode, I talk with founders, operators, and executives who are figuring this out in real time. Some are finding real success with new strategies, others are learning expensive lessons. But they're all navigating the same fundamental challenge. How do you build a sustainable alcohol business in a digital world? Whether you're running a winery exploring e-commerce, looking at alcohol as a retailer, or building technology for regulated industries, these conversations will hopefully give you the context you need to understand where this industry is heading. Today's guest brings a perspective we haven't explored much on the show: operational compliance at scale. Matthew Houliston is the Data and Systems Director at Serve Legal, the UK and Ireland's leading compliance audit provider for age-restricted products. Since 2006, Serve Legal has conducted over 200,000 independent audits annually across alcohol, vape, and lottery sales. That's nearly 2 decades of data on how retailers actually operate when it comes to age verification. What makes Matthew's perspective particularly relevant right now is the intersection of compliance and customer experience. As technology like digital ID and AI-powered age estimation enters alcohol retail, questions emerge about bias, training, and how these tools affect the actual shopping experience. Matthew's team has been developing testing methodologies to identify bias in AI verification tools, critical work as these technologies scales. And their audit data reveals operational patterns that matter. Compliance rates drop in evenings and weekends, peak periods see different staff and customer demographics, and the festive season creates unique pressures. Today we're exploring what 200,000 audits reveal about operational systems, how new technologies are performing in practice, and what retailers need to know as digital ID becomes standard. So Matthew, thank you for joining us. Serve Legal runs over 200,000 compliance audits per year across UK alcohol retail. That might be the most comprehensive data set on alcohol sales that exists. What does scale reveal that individual retailers might not see on their own?
Yeah, like I said, thanks very much. I think it's a really interesting question, looking at the kind of scale of the data versus those independent retailers. Kind of scale of data unavailable to them generally. What it tends to show, and what's really interesting about it, is the link between compliance data, which is primarily what we gather our data around, are people asking young people for ID and adhering to company policy, but also how that linked towards consumer behaviour. So, in terms of your consumers and how they're purchasing alcohol, when are they coming into stores, what are the interaction between staff members and customers, and how kind of staff member training also impacts how they deal with those customers. Looking at our compliance data and those customer behaviour, that can pull out some really interesting stats.
What surprised you most in the data?
So, as you mentioned from the top, there's classic trends that happen between time of day and day of week that influence overall compliance data. However, you also see on that kind of consumer and staff member relationships element of things such as gender really influences performance. So looking at how male staff members interact with female customers, for example, compliance tends to drop. So it's showing some kind of social economic influences that impact the overall experience of that consumer. And similarly, oppositely, we see in terms of female customers and female staff members a higher level of compliance. So those kind of nuanced bits of data or interaction between the customer and the staff members are bits that you as a smaller independent retailer be able to see without being able to see that larger aggregated data.
That's interesting. So just so that I'm understanding this correctly, when there are males who work at the location and females are the ones coming, they have the lowest pass rate, which means they're checking their IDs the least frequently?
That's absolutely correct. And then, oppositely, staff members to female customers. Now, you could break that down to perceptions of customers. So is it potentially that female customers at that age range tend to look older than comparison to their male peers, or is it that kind of social dynamic between the male staff member and the female customer, whereby there's something about that relationship that inhibits that male staff member asking the female customer for ID, or at least makes it less likely that they will do. And it's it's a trend that comes around year on year, and as I mentioned, it's just that bit that probably a nuance that you wouldn't see at the smaller retailer in comparison to the larger, who have access to that data set.
Do you, in doing these types of aggregation of data and looking at the data set, do you then go back to, I don't know, the retailers and say, hey, here's what we think you guys should focus on is we think that obviously we think men should be checking more women's IDs, but we're also seeing a really high compliance rate with women checking women. And so are you kind of nudging them and saying, oh, here's what we think you guys should be focusing on as you think about how to fix up what we're finding in these audits?
Absolutely, yeah. Obviously, the gender comparison is a really difficult one to tackle. How do you tackle individual perceptions? Your training data or your training material around targeting young males within your staff members to ensure that they are ID asking young females for ID. That's a really tough challenge or tough nut to crack. Kind of some of the larger things that we can look at, or more easily targeted areas that we often consult with our clients on, are things such as till types, time of days, day of weeks. Those are more easily targeted and addressed. You can increase the number of staff members that you have on certain till to deal with peak trading times, or you can reinforce certain training message at that point in time in the day to refresh people's memory of the particular challenges that we can do. But the gender one is a really difficult one to crack, which is probably why it is a consistent trend year on year, but it's an interesting one to view. And it's not just of staff member, but as I mentioned, it's the age of the staff member also has a significant influence. So younger staff members are less likely to ask for ID than more mature staff members. Now, that could be as a result of younger staff members feeling less confident about their ability to ask for ID, or even potentially them feeling closer to that age range and therefore feeling that they know the age range better, but that's not in adherence with their overall employer policy. But as we go up the age range and more mature staff, potentially people that have been working for these businesses for longer and are more confident in their ability to challenge for ID, that's when compliance rates tend to go up.
Got it. When you think about patterns between independents and chains, what kind of things come up? What do you see?
So obviously, a larger chain, they have the ability to centralize training material, create standards and push and roll them out with very set procedures. They have the ability to have, CCT, security, structured teams to help push those agendas, and obviously, get audited by companies such as ours, and follow up with those audits with actions. Independent don't necessarily have that support behind them. Now, they do have trading associations behind them, such as within the UK, there's a body called the ACS, which is the Association of Convenience Stores, that can help them with those kind of things. But it's not a directive that's coming from the above. So that's probably the biggest difference in terms of where the larger retailers have got that strength and weight behind them, whereas the independent don't. And I suppose that's the benefit of companies such as Serve Legal releasing data such as this out into the ether, in which it gives those independent the ability to see that aggregated but anonymized data, and hopefully use that compliance trends / customer behavior trends to inform their own decisions.
Yeah. What you mentioned earlier, peak windows, the data shows transaction patterns shift dramatically, evenings, weekends. Those aren't just compliance challenges, they're your highest revenue windows. So what does the data tell us about consumer behavior during those times? Because I'm assuming most people are coming to buy alcohol at night. Most people aren't waking up. I mean, some people are waking up and buying alcohol right away, but most people are probably like getting it with their dinner or whatever it is, or where they're going to go out. What does that tell us about that?
If we're looking at normal patterns of alcohol purchases, then there tend to be increases in alcohol sales towards the evening, let's say the post-work drink, whether that's in hospitality or within kind of more traditional supermarket retail environments, or on the weekends, as you're out doing things and spending money, eating out, and such. Those are the opportunities that these retailers have to make money off of alcohol sales, and obviously with the increase of sales. But that's clearly where compliance dips. So what is the behaviour there that kind of influencing those dips? Is it purely that the volume of alcohol sales is putting stress and pressure, operational pressure on the staff members to be able to deal with the volume of transactions? And therefore compliance standard is slipping. People they've not got the company policy at the forefront of their mind. They're just trying to get around the transactions. Or are people becoming desensitized to the process? They're processing so much alcohol that they become a bit disengaged with the overall process. And I often use a comparison within the UK retail environment with self-scan tills. You've got one member of staff often looking after a bank of 10 self-scan tills, and come 5 p.m, everyone leaves the office, they're going to get a drink or something. That one member of staff is running around authorising transaction after transaction, not only just obviously solving the dreaded unexpected item in bagging area, but the ID challenges. So moments definitely create operational stress and sleeps toward the compliant dips that we see.
So how can the retailers use that data to staff better?
So, knowledge is power. So just simply, first of all, knowing that is really going to benefit them. Knowing those differences between how different types of staff members interact, or how younger people need more support on the till, how the different points, time of day and day of the week affect overall performance, enables them to inform their processes and their training, maybe looking at those particular tills, once again coming back to the self-scan, but maybe manning that with a young, inexperienced member of staff during peak alcohol trading hours is not the wisest thing to be doing. Now, we'll understand that they're trying to save money and reduce costs, so maybe adding additional staff members onto that particular bank of tills is not what they want to be doing, but taking that data and utilising that to inform who they put on that till could hopefully benefit their overall compliance rates. Compliance rates is obviously what I focus on, and that's my business, but these things often go hand in hand with customer experience. So having someone that's more confident, more able to deal with higher volumes and footfalls of alcohol sales and traffic, that gives consumers a better experience as well, which drives repeat trade, really.
Yeah. Do you think there's a hesitation or some sort of fear of doing more compliance checking during checkout is going to reduce the total amount of sales or lead to a worse experience for the customers, which is why you see less of it during peak times?
Yeah, like I said, I think that links back to the customer experience. It's, I suppose there is a hesitation to create friction within that customer journey. If that, once again, the peak trading hours and the till type scenario, if that customer's been waiting for a couple of minutes, which it might seem ridiculous, but we're in that kind of world now whereby a couple of minutes people get frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
It creates a point of friction if that member of staff then comes over and then wants to challenge them for ID. And it could potentially put that person in an awkward situation whereby the customer's not happy, they're then challenging back, and the staff member might take the easy option in just authorising it, which once again is not adhering to their overall policy. But yeah, definitely user experience is a massive element of those journeys, those alcohol transactions and repeat customers. So staff members making that as smooth as possible could be a big influence on that.
So when retailers improve their verification process, let's say they're very clear in the alcohol section or wherever it is that like, hey, we're going to ID you. Like you're going to get ID'd. So have your ID ready if you're buying alcohol. What does that do to the transaction speed and customer satisfaction?
Well, obviously being forewarned is fantastic, and setting expectations for customers in the experience that they're going to receive is really valuable and does aid with that user journey. Obviously, in setting out clear expectation to your customers, you're also empowering your staff members to be able to make those challenges, because they can lean on the fact that this is our company policy, as you're aware, we have to ID everyone, in which I'm aware in America it's a very common thing, asking for ID with all alcohol transactions. Setting up your staff members for success in those compliance challenges is really key.
So tell me the difference, because when I go to buy alcohol here, I always pull out my ID, and you can tell I've got white hairs. People usually don't need my IDs, but I always have my ID out. Is that not the case in the UK? Is it very infrequent that they get asked?
No, I think we've got a very different culture around those alcohol transactions. And what we have is generally across the board a challenge 25 policy that is utilised by retailers, which is if a person looks under the age of 25, then you should be asking them for ID. The premise of that is that there's a 7-year buffer between 18 in the UK of when you can buy alcohol and 25, and that gives the staff members enough of a comfort zone in which they can then challenge that customer and say, I'm employing our challenge 25 policy, I'd like to see your ID. But I'm mid-30s now, but I haven't been asked for ID for a very long time. So it does become a point that just it's not the norm.
Got it. That's interesting. All right, let's talk about digital ID. Can you walk me through what it is, how it's rolling out, and how it's going to impact all of this?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously I've got quite a UK-centric view on this, but in essence, digital IDs are being developed globally, in which the UK got a number of providers of it, but to replace the physical cards, so your driving license, your passport, that you might go and take towards purchasing alcohol. Obviously, that's just one very niche use case of it, because digital IDs in general have far broader applications. But within the UK, digital ID, the thing, you can now translate your driving license into a form of digital ID, and it can already be used for certain transactions. So you can purchase an e-cig with it or cigarettes, but it's currently not applicable for alcohol within the UK. And that's a big barrier towards adoption within the UK, because there's no point a retailer accepting a digital ID for e-cigs but not then accepting it for alcohol, because what happens if you've got a transaction in which you've got the two items, so how do you process that? So it's not being broadly adopted. The underlying principles of digital ID are creating accessibility to have that on you at any one time, but also it's a more privacy-preserving methodology of storing your information, ease of use. It has broader application beyond just being a driver's license use for demonstrating your age. It can do other things as well. Like I said, it's being developed globally. So lots of private companies that are doing it within the UK and within the US. You've also got the big corporates of Apple and Google that are starting to enter the market and developing their own products. And as well, you've got governments who are looking at this and going, where's the opportunity for us to centralise and streamline access to government services? So here in the UK, the government are proposing introducing a mandatory digital ID for UK citizens, which is causing a little bit of controversy amongst the UK citizens as to whether they want a mandatory digital ID. And obviously concerns amongst those people who are providing digital ID services already to how that will impact their business.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And I think it really does break the system if you can use it for one part of your compliance piece, but not the other part. The idea that you want to buy cigarettes and you can use your digital ID, but then you can't use it for alcohol, makes it such a difficult experience. And if we're talking about making customer experiences better, that's the opposite right now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a year or so ago, ServLegal did some audits within the physical retail world, utilising digital ID, and it was clear that adoption was low. Customers didn't know about it. The staff members didn't know how to interact with it and deal with it and validate it, and which this digital ID is going to bring in how you process them that are not well understood at this point in time.
I want to switch gears and talk about AI. So there's AI age estimators, and there's you guys have been developing testing methodologies to identify bias in those AI age verification tools. What have you discovered, and why does this matter for retailers? Have you had any experience with that?
Yeah, so we primarily focused on facial age estimation models. They were kind of the start of this process. And it's more traditional AI and machine learning in terms of it estimates your age based upon analyzing your face anonymously, and based upon training data, it predicts your age. So we were lucky enough to do some research with Durham University here in the UK, and a professor that had got experience with analysing facial models, especially kind of the impact on facial phenotypes and things like that, on how it influences the output of those models. I think the thing to say is on them is that not all models are built equally. You know, there are people that demonstrate really good testing protocols and are very open about how they've built their model, the training data set that they've built or utilized to train those models to make them effective. But I'd personally be skeptical of any business that claims that they've got 100% accuracy on this AI model and it had no bias within it. I think they're massive red flags. So like for people that are looking at AI models or age estimation models, I think they need to be looking at vendors who are transparent with how they've built their models, transparent with how they test their models, the volume of testing that they've done on that, and how they mitigate bias or have mitigated bias in the past on that age estimation model. Because, you know, it's continuously an evolving thing and you've got to develop it, and based upon where you've trained your model, that could influence the output of it. So really kind of basic example of that would be if I trained my AI model purely based upon a UK population data set, well, my model is going to be biased towards the UK population. It might work brilliantly in the UK, but if I then take that over to America, other countries in which different demographics and split demographics within those countries, then it might not work as well. So once again, understanding the kind of how it's been built is really key.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I think that's a good thing for people to keep in mind as they're thinking about rolling those out, is like, how are they trained? What's the transparency they're showing you? Where is it trained? What's it trained on? And how is it evolving to continue to get better? So I appreciate your insight on that. I want to get into our rapid fire round, but before that, I wanted to ask you one last big question. If you could share one or two like major insights from all of your audit information with a retailer, if they said, okay, what are like the top things that you're seeing? What are the things that we should be implementing? What should we be doing to help pass these? What would you tell them?
So I'd be looking at the classic trends. I'd be looking at those trends of how does the customer experience and the kind of flow of your customer traffic impact your operational capabilities, thus how does that impact your overall compliance rates. You know, I'd utilize those pieces of information that we put out there to help those staff members and help retailers inform their training material to be able to identify those gaps and kind of preempt where potential non-compliance can creep in. As I said, you know, lots of these trends appear year on year, so it is predictable, and you can utilize that to help yourself pass.
That's great. All right, let's do some rapid fire. These will be quick. We'll just do a few here. Technology investment. What do you think is the technology investment with the fastest ROI for alcohol retailers?
It's a difficult one. The biggest impacting one at the moment is going to be the impact of digital ID on that. And that is probably the most immediate challenge that they're going to face. And there is a balance between being first adopters of this technology and how that might help them drive in alcohol sales. You know, similarly to what we've seen with contactless payment in the past and how that transitioned to mobile payment, we will get to a point whereby the physical IDs start to simmer out, people become more dependent on the mobile IDs. And so there's an opportunity for retailers to capitalize on the opportunities of digital ID and how that might help them drive in trade as people start to leave their IDs at home and just carry their mobile devices. But that will bring challenges and risks. So, what are the challenges between being the first adopter and also finding the right solution? This is a very new emerging market. And as I mentioned before, we've got government ID that's being developed. We've got private ID. We've got the likes of Apple and Google entering the market. So how do you know that you're getting the right product and adopting it at the right time, that you're not shooting yourself in the foot by committing to a solution that doesn't work and isn't interoperable, but you also want to make the best of that opportunity.
Yeah, you make an interesting point, and I know we're doing rapid fire, but I'm going to stop
Sorry.
there for a second. No. You make an interesting point because I've gone to places that don't accept Apple Pay, and
Yeah.
I don't have my wallet. It's the only thing I have is my phone. So once the digital ID gets to that same level, you're going to say, well, I didn't even bring my ID because
Yeah.
I've been using my digital ID without an issue in most places. Like, you're likely to lose out on some sales because of that.
Yeah. It will inevitably become ubiquitous, and all retailers will need to adapt to it. But I suppose coming back to your question of kind of what's the most immediate and what's the biggest opportunity, well, that is it.
So with digital ID, do you think it'll be a customer friction reducer or just a way to check a regulatory checkbox?
I think there are two answers to that. There's a short-term and a long-term impact to digital ID and how that will influence the customer journey. Short-term, we're already seeing that there's an awful lot of confusion within the UK about how it's going to be rolled out. What are the solutions? What are the interoperability solutions? How's the government ID going to fit into all of this? Retailers within the short term, or at least as it's stated right now, will have to continue to accept physical ID. And they can't not accept physical ID. Mm-hmm. So you're going to end up with a bit of pain in the beginning as you're training your staff member to use this new hardware, to use these new processes, to understand how to validate these new IDs and what's acceptable, whilst also maintaining the traditional stream of physical ID and making sure the staff members know how to process and deal with those things. In the long term, though, the aim and the ultimate aim that you want is to improve the customer journey. With a bit of time and embedding those processes in, I do think the long term journey looks positive. It will be that as adoption grows, more people will move towards digital ID. Those processes will become standard. Retailers will become more comfortable with it, and it should reduce friction and should aid with those transactions and getting the alcohol sales through the door, really.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let me ask you the last question. What do you think the biggest advantage that independent retailers have over the chains?
The independent retailers they've got local knowledge. They've got fast transactions with local customers. They can build up a rapport with those customers, making the most of those opportunities and making the most of their customer basis is the biggest advantage that they've got over the larger retailers. That will be able to adopt technology and be able to handle it with greater ease. But the independents need to utilize those associations and those bodies that are available to them to help them adopt any sort of technology and make the most of their kind of customer basis, their local experience to help improve the service that they're offering toward their communities.
Yeah, that makes sense. Matthew, this was fascinating. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for sharing what 2 decades, all those audits, over 200,000 a year, reveal about the operational reality of alcohol retail. This kind of evidence-based perspective is exactly what operators need as new technologies reshape how age verification works. This has been episode 32 of the Business of Online Alcohol. If you found this conversation useful, subscribe wherever you listen. And if you know someone in alcohol retail, particularly anyone navigating the digital ID, AI verification technologies, send it their way. I've been Rami, and thank you for listening to the Business of Online Alcohol.